Man, let's get started, huh? Let's do this. Let's get some light on it. Hey, there. Oh, you guys are all here. Okay. Hey, we are going to be in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 27 to start, and then we'll go to Hebrews chapter 12. I'm sorry, verse 24. Hebrews 10:24. Who's got a New King James Version? Who's got one? Yeah? Jeremy? Would you read verse 24 of Hebrews chapter 10 loud and clear for us? Hebrews 10:24. And then we'll go over to Hebrews chapter 12. 10:24.
And let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works.
Awesome. Let us consider one another to stir up love and good works. Saturday night is known as two different things at camp. One is cry night, right? That's the night when it's like we schedule in some time for everybody to get weepy and cry, okay? There's nothing wrong with crying. There's nothing wrong with weeping. And if you end up crying tonight, that's not a bad thing, okay? Just being funny. The other thing is Saturday night is known for nap time, right? You didn't sleep last night. You know, busy all day yesterday. You didn't sleep last night, and up early this morning. And if you ever went to sleep, and then you've been just going all day, been in the sun, thin mountain air, running around shooting bow and arrows at each other, throwing tomahawks, eating Oreo cookies with God knows what on them, and then Saturday night comes, man. It's like somebody turned the heater back on, and now it's like, oh yeah, it's getting real comfortable in here, and you're wondering like, where are we going with all this? Do you love the person next to you? Some of you people are like, not really, but you know, hey, if you love the person next to you, they might need a stirring during the session. That's right. Cassius, show us how it's done? Yeah. Yeah. Push on them. Maybe like a wake up, you bum, something like that kind of thing, you know? All right? So they may need to be stirred up. Hebrews chapter 12 is where we are going to be at, verses 3 and 4. And we'll spend most of our time in 3, and then we'll look at 4 very briefly. But Hebrews chapter 12 is where we're at. And we have had, I think, in my estimation, some excellent Bible studies thus far, up to this point. I think that Daniel did a great job last night, him and his glorious beard. And then I think that Jason did a great job this morning also. And I was just really pleased with both of them. And so hopefully I can give you something with some content here that will be fitting, you know, concerning the studies that we've had so far. We all get the general idea, right? This Hebrews chapter 12, the first 3 verses, especially the first 2, are imploring us, encouraging us to run the race of faith. And to do so with endurance. That's the point. Jason pointed out this morning that whenever you're running long distance, you're going to need some encouragement along the way, right? This is why when you sign up for a 5K or a 10K or a half or a marathon or whatever, you know, there's like these crazy people that are out along the course. You know, let's say you sign up for the Menifee, you know, City of Menifee 5K fun run or whatever it's called. I don't know if they do one of those or not. But you sign up, and then you go out there to run, and there's all these crazy people out there. And you're like, man, we're out here running at like 5 in the morning. Who are all these people? And there are literally, there are people that are family members, and they're cheering their family members on. But then there are just random people out there who evidently don't have anything better to do with their lives than to go out there and cheer strangers on as they run by. But it's very nice. When you're running a race, it's nice to get cheered on. And you have that encouragement, like, okay, somebody cares. But they really don't because they don't know you. But you just feel in the moment like, oh yeah, somebody cares, and you keep pushing and running. And so Hebrews chapter 12, the writer started out by saying, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. And that was referring back to all those saints back in chapter 11. That, you know what, they're a cloud of witnesses. They're there, they're cheering us on, and they're that 12th man. Anybody remember that from summer camp? 12th man, yes? 12th man there is like, come on, let's go. They're cheering you on. And I can't help but think of this race. Let us run the race with endurance. I can't help but think of that race, this race that we're running as Christians. I imagine it being like a, now I can't remember, what's the kind of race when you hand a baton? Relay race, thank you very much, goodness. Saturday night, okay, speaker's falling asleep. But the race is really like a relay race, because all of those saints from chapter 11 of Hebrews, they're running, they ran their race, and now really it's like them handing off the baton to us. And then we want to hand it off to someone else. That's what I'm doing right now. That's why I'm involved in youth ministry. Why would I do something like that? Some of your parents are like, oh, God bless your soul for taking these guys up to camp. Like, why in the world would you do this? And it's like, well, I couldn't find a better job. But anyways, just kidding. I couldn't. This is the best job ever. But I can't. I mean, it's like me passing on the baton to you guys. Okay, I'm running the race of faith, and as far as length of time, I've been in it a little bit longer than you, and so I'm trying to pass it on to you and help you avoid some of the obstacles and pitfalls that I ran into, and along the way, and trying to teach you and help you out. And so that's how I see this passage here. And so I love every bit of it. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 3, we continue from the first couple of studies. And what does he say? For consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself. We were told in verse 2, to look unto Jesus. Remember that? Look to Jesus. Remember Pastor Jason this morning pointing it out? And it was looking unto Jesus. Now we're told not just to look unto Jesus, but to really consider him. Now we'll stop there for just a moment. Let's think about this. There's looking at someone, okay? And then there's looking at them and considering them. Who is this person, and what have they accomplished in their life, or what have they failed at, or what are they made up of, or what do they do at night, or do they have good grades? What's their relationship like with their parents, or whatever? You can look at someone, but then there's looking and considering. Okay? You come to camp, you see a lot of people. Some of you are not part of the normal posse here, the normal crew. You come as a guest, and you see a lot of people, but you don't really consider them. You don't really get to know them. And the writer of Hebrews is telling us now, he's taking us a step further, looking unto Jesus, but now he says consider. You've looked at Jesus, but now consider him. We must consider him, meditate upon him, and reason with ourselves from his case to our own. The word actually means to analogize. We must analogize as the word is. Compare Christ's sufferings and ours. And we shall find that as his sufferings far exceeded ours in the nature and measure of them, so his patience far excels ours and is a perfect pattern for us to imitate. So as we consider Jesus, we're looking in closer. What about this Jesus that we're supposed to look to as we're running? What about this Jesus? Consider him, it says in verse 3, who endured such hostility from sinners against himself. And let's go ahead and read the second part there where it says, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls. Now, the first part of that is what I called our motivation right here. Our motivation. Our motivation is the consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself. And then the second part of verse 3 is the obstacles where it says, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls. Now, we'll get there in just a few minutes, but the weary and the discouraged, those are the obstacles. That's what we want to avoid. But we start at the first part of verse 3 where it says, consider him. Consider Jesus. Now, here's what happens. I start to think about Jesus, who endured such hostility from sinners against himself. Okay? What kind of hostilities? Let me rip off a few for you here. At his own synagogue, that's the synagogue that he belonged to from his own town in Nazareth. They wanted to kill him. I mean, that's a hostility. That's the equivalent of someone saying, Nevaeh belongs to a church. She goes to a church. And her church wants to kill her. Might want to find a new church, right? Probably don't want to stay there. That would be like you belonging to a church, but finding out that the church wants to kill you. They reject you. They don't want you there. That's kind of a big deal, okay? What other kind of hostilities? The religious leaders constantly tried to trap and embarrass him. Constantly. Those same religious leaders lied about Jesus, calling him a drunkard and a glutton. Jesus was nothing farther from the truth. Jesus was not a drunkard, and he certainly was no glutton. Glutton means that all he did was eat. Just party all the time. That's the idea. Drunkard and glutton. What other hostilities? He was betrayed by one of his own disciples. Remember that story? Judas, right? Betrayed him with a what? The pieces of silver. He did it for the pieces of silver. What did he do it? With a kiss. Just betrayed him with a kiss. He was mocked and beaten by many. His own people cried out against him, crucify him. His own people. People who had a week earlier been laying down palm branches as he's coming into Jerusalem, and they're going, oh, Hosanna, Hosanna, save now. And they're looking at Jesus like he's the Messiah, he's the king. A week later, they're going, crucify him, kill him. Incredible. So those are the hostilities. For consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself. And you're to consider what he endured so that you will not become discouraged. And what else? So that you won't become weary and discouraged in your souls. But here's the challenge. Is that when we think about Jesus and the hostilities that he experienced, what we'll oftentimes do is we'll go, well, yeah, it was really tough. But Jesus, I mean, come on, he was God. So, I mean, it couldn't have been that tough. He was God. He knew he was going to do it. It's all part of God's plan. So, I don't know. I mean, Jesus, I guess, is a good example, but he doesn't really know what it's like to be a teenager. Wait a minute. Was Jesus ever a teenager? Was he born when he was 30 years old? No. That means at some point in his life, Jesus was a teenager. Isn't that a trip? You ever thought about that before? What? Now, I'm thinking that because he was God in flesh, I'm guessing he probably didn't have any problems with acne. Probably had just perfect complexion. And, makes me mad a little bit, but I don't know. Who knows? I don't know. But he was a teenager. He experienced all of these things. But here's what we need to understand. Here's what we need to understand. Something called the hypostatic union. Everybody say hypo. Hypo, right? Static. Hypostatic union. What does that mean? What that means, that's a technical term that Bible teachers use. And here's what it means. It means that Jesus was 100% man, human being. How do we know that? Remember when he got to the well and sat down because he was tired? He was thirsty. He experienced sleeplessness. He was 100% human being. Now, he was also, at the same time, 100% God. Now we go, come on. Hypostatic, 100% man, 100% God. How do you do that? Don't ask me. I don't have a clue. My laptop is back there on, see, it's right in front of Matt right there with all the stickers on it. Put all the stickers because I was trying to look cool. Back there on my computer is this. So if my computer's over there and the thing's on my, how does it get over here? Like, there's no strings attached? Like, how in the world how does it do that? I don't know. So when I hear that Jesus is 100% man and 100% God, it's not that big a deal if I don't understand it. I don't know. I just know that's what the Bible teaches. The reason I bring that up is because sometimes we'll go, well, we're supposed to look to Jesus, but, come on, he was perfect. He wasn't even, he was God, wasn't even man. No, he was 100% God and 100% man. And the things that he experienced for real. They were the real deal. He experienced hunger and thirst and fatigue. He experienced pain, as we'll look at here in just a moment. But Jesus experienced everything that we experience. Now, from that, we take confidence. We go, okay, let me consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself. So let's consider Jesus. What about this hostility? Well, we ripped through some of these hostilities real quick, but let's talk about some more hostilities. What about when Jesus was being arrested and one of his disciples had a sword? I like that guy. And he takes out this sword. And he's like, you're going to arrest Jesus, huh? And he pulls that thing out and he swings for one of the guy's heads. And in the process of swinging for his head to try and remove his head from his neck by just an inch or two, he misses, hits the guy's ear, and does like a Van Gogh thing, like ear falls on the ground. And Jesus says, hey, put your sword away. It's not how we do things. And then Jesus actually touched the guy and healed his ear. They came to arrest him. I would have been like, that's right, sucker. You're going to lose the other one if you don't back up, right? But no, Jesus is like, hey, we don't live that way. And he healed his captor's ear. From that point, it just goes on. And that story is in Luke 22. In Matthew 26, they spit on Jesus. They spit at his face. They slap him. They blindfold him. Punch him in the face. Mock him. He never fights back. They start asking him questions. It's just what we call a kangaroo court. They take Jesus to Caiaphas, the no longer high priest, but everybody still bows down to this chunk. And they take him there, and they start questioning him, and Jesus just stays silent. Except once or twice they go, hey, are you the king of the Jews? You called yourself the great I am. Is that what you are? And he says, what you say is correct. But other than that, he just stays silent. The Roman guards take him, and they beat him some more. They do all sorts of things to him, and yet Jesus remains silent. He endured such hostilities from sinners against himself. In Matthew chapter 27, it says, then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole battalion before him, and they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and twisting together a crown of thorns, They put it on his head and put a reed in his right hand, and kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." They spit on him. They took the reed, that's a stick, and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the robe, put his own clothes on him, and led him away to crucify him. Jesus, remember that hypostatic union thing? He's 100% God, but he's also 100% man. In his 100% humanity, he experienced all that pain. Don't ever think that, well, he was Jesus, and he walked on water, and he did all these miracles, so he didn't really experience all that pain. No, this is the point that the writer of Hebrews is making, is that Jesus, in his humanity, experienced every single bit of that. Let me read something to you. It's going to blow your mind. It was in this condition that Jesus faced the first physical abuse. He's just been arrested. It's at night. Punches and slaps to the face and head while blindfolded. Unable to anticipate the blows, Jesus was badly bruised, his mouth and eyes possibly injured. The psychological effects of the false trials should not be underestimated. Consider that Jesus faced them bruised, dehydrated, exhausted, possibly in shock. In the previous 12 hours, Jesus had suffered emotional trauma, rejection by his closest friends, a cruel beating, and a sleepless night during which he had to walk miles between unjust hearings. Despite the fitness he must certainly have gained during his travels in Palestine, he was in no way prepared for the punishment of flogging. The effects would be worse as a result. A man to be flogged, who was being sentenced to flogging, was first stripped of his clothes and his hands tied to a post above his head, so that he was up on his tippy toes like this, which would stretch all the skin on his back, making his skin tight. He was then whipped across the shoulders, back, his butt, thighs, and legs. The soldier standing behind and to one side of the victim. The whip used, the flagellum, was designed to make this a devastating punishment, bringing the victim close to death. Several short, heavy leather thongs with 2 small balls of lead or iron attached near the end of each. Pieces of sheep's bone were sometimes included and pressed into the leather straps. As the scourging proceeds, the heavy leather thongs produced first superficial cuts, then deeper to damage underlying tissues. Bleeding becomes severe when not only capillaries and veins are cut, but also arteries in the underlying muscles. The small metal balls first produce large, deep bruises, which are broken open by further blows. The fragments of sheep's bone rip the flesh as the whip is drawn back. And the whip was long enough that as they whipped the back, the straps from the front would grab a hold of the stomach, and the Roman guard would then yank it back, so doing his best to rip every bit of skin that he can. When the beating is finished, the skin of the back in ribbons and the entire area torn and bleeding. Jesus was allowed no time to recover before facing his next ordeal. Made to stand, he was dressed in a robe by jeering soldiers, crowned with a twisted band of thorny twigs, and to complete the parody, given a wooden staff as a king's scepter. They spat on Jesus, struck him on the head with the wooden staff. The long thorns were driven into the sensitive scalp tissue, producing profuse bleeding. But even more terrible was the reopening of the wounds on Jesus' back, when the robe was torn off again. Further weakened physically and emotionally, Jesus was led away to be executed. It's not over. The wooden cross used by the Romans was too heavy to be carried by one man. Instead, the victim to be crucified was made to bear the detached crossbar across his shoulders, carrying it outside the city walls to the place of execution. The heavy upright portion of the cross was permanently in position here. Jesus was unable to carry his load. The beam, it is believed, weighed between 75 and 125 pounds. He collapses under the burden, and an onlooker was ordered to take the cross for him.